Part 43, Thou preparest a table before me, wild harvest edibles. Just an important note, as you navigate any health challenge, it's always recommended that you partner with a medical practitioner that shares your philosophy of the care of the human body, in disease and in health. The information shared in this presentation is meant to educate and improve your wellness toolbox and aid in returning to health if sick, and maintaining good health when well. It should not be construed as medical advice, simply as tools that have been used successfully by others in similar situations. As always, investigate and verify any treatment protocol or procedure for yourself, not blindly accepting anything without due diligence. Thomas Edison said that the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease. Back in 1885, in Testimonies for the Church, Ellen White spoke on this topic as well. There are many ways of practicing the healing art, but there is only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties: pure air and water, cleanliness, a proper diet, purity of life, and a firm trust in God are remedies for the want of which thousands are dying. Yet these remedies are going out of date because their skillful use requires work that the people do not appreciate. Fresh air, exercise, pure water, and clean, sweet premises are within the reach of all, but with little expense. But drugs are expensive, both in the outlay of means, that is money, and the effect produced upon the system. In 3 John 1 and verse 2, it states, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers." And it's a very true axiom that as our soul is in right relationship with God, our health can also benefit tremendously. In Romans 12, 1 and 2, Paul states, "I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Today's topic will start with alfalfa, Medicago sativa. It's also known as lucerne. Lucerne is a common name for it. It also happens to be a city in Switzerland. So those are two commonalities there. It's found worldwide as a perennial. That means it grows back each season. It self-seeds and has a rootstock that maintains viability through the winter. It's been known as a livestock feed, grows to 12 to 30 inches in height, but also has beneficial properties that can be used both food and medicinally for people. The flowers have a color range from pink to purple to blue. You can see the white and kind of purplish bluish lavender varieties here, all the way to yellow. The flower you can see in the lower picture is found at the end of the stems and the leaf axials, and it's in the pea family, the Fabaceae family, and the seed pods we'll see later are very coiled and eject their seeds. The leaf is alternate and oblong, has very finely toothed edges. There have 3 egg-shaped leaflets per axial end, and they may be hairy and from 1 inch to 1.5 inches in length. From an edibility standpoint, the leaves, the shoots, and the sprouts are edible, so you can harvest the leaves for use, as well as using the sprouts and the seeds. So from a nutritional standpoint, very high nutrition, has a cholesterol lowering effect that could be from its inherent properties as well as the substitutionary properties of one food over another. The shoots and the leaves, you can use the tender young shoots. That's very common from the sprouting mechanism. You can see some sprouts up above. Harvest the young leaves and the shoots in the early morning. We know that many plants have aromatic compounds in them that throughout a warm day will become volatile and escape the plant, but through the night are restored. So their therapeutic and nutritional properties are highest when picked early. The leaves can be used for tea, dried and used, or fresh, and they can add nutrition to other dishes when added as an additional ingredient to various types of food. The seeds, as the flowers go to seed, you can collect them. You can just collect the coiled seed pods. You can see them on the lower central figure and to the left with the flower still present. Put them in a paper sack to complete their drying process, and then shake the bag to release, sift out the various leftover pod pieces, and then have the seeds left over. Very fine, smaller than a sesame seed. Then you can also grind that into a nutritious flour that can be used in baking. For sprouting alfalfa, just take 2 tablespoons of alfalfa seeds in a quart jar with a screen, or you can use one of the various sprouting devices that are available that are in trays. Some are clear, some are opaque. You can use different systems, but you can just go with the simple stick in the sand method of using a quart jar and some water. So first of all, rinse the seeds well in water and soak them overnight. That's about approximately 8 hours. Then drain them well and invert the jar over the screen, allowing air to flow. Rinse those seeds every 8 hours. And actually, after 8 hours, you could then transfer them to another container if you prefer to sprout in a tray, or you can just leave them in the jar that was rinsed in. So rinse them every 8 hours, 2 to 3 times a day. Personally, I do a once-a-day rinse, but it helps maintain their freshness with a greater rinse time. They sprout in 3 days, and keep them in the dark until they're about 3 inches long. Then you can even expose them to light for a day to maximize the chlorophyll that's present in their leaves. Rinse well and refrigerate well, and they will keep for several days, but use them in a timely fashion. So alfalfa sprouts have a rich load of vitamin K and C, folate, copper, and manganese, which are inherently present in the seeds and are then bioavailable upon sprouting. So just keep in mind that the leaves of alfalfa, the mature leaves, contain a saponin-like compound that can break down red blood cells if used in excess. So it's not something you want to eat as your primary food source, but just add it as an addition to your nutritional profile. The sprouts can be contaminated. This is one sprout that has a history of potential contamination, bacterial contamination. If you cook them, that can help mitigate any problems with that. I haven't personally experienced any problem with that. Just want to be careful with your rinsing and the sources from which you obtain your seeds. Our next plant that we'll look at is American Bistort, Polygonum bistortes, and it's also known as knotweed, smartweed, or snakeweed. It ranges from western Canada to New Mexico, so quite a western profile, and the regions west of the Rockies. It's found in montane, subalpine, and open alpine slopes. There's another genus, the Polygonum viviparum. It's also known as the alpine bistort. It can grow from 8 to 28 inches tall, and the higher the elevation you go, the shorter the plant will be. It has a stout, upright rootstock, and it stands upright, as you can see in the pictures that are presented here. There's about 200 different species, and the palatability between the different species varies by species. So that would be an experimental process discovering which one has the greatest palatability. It does have an acidic sap that when collecting, some people may be sensitive to that. So if you are, just avoid touching the sap, use gloves, or some other way of mitigating that getting on your body. The flowers can range from pink to white. They have no petals, have very dense spikes, and it flowers between May and September. And there are seed-bearing achenes that are often present at the same time. We'll see that in a future picture here. The leaf is lance-shaped, long, sheathed and basal, about 6 inches long, and the stems can range in color from red to green. The leaves at the base are heart-shaped, and they can be leathery and bluish to dark green in color, and have smaller leaves on the flower stalks themselves. From an edibility standpoint, the parts that are edible are the starchy rootstock. You can see that on the right side. Not huge roots, but definitely edible. The seeds themselves, you can see the achenes present on the flower. As it progresses up the stem, the achenes are forming and the seams are becoming mature. The leaves, there's the basal leaf and then the stem leaf. The shoots and also bulblets around the rootstock can also be eaten. Some harvest tips. You can see the size of the seeds there. Harvest them after flowering in the fall. You can roast and grind those seeds into a meal or flour for baking. Use it as a thickener in soups and stews and the like. The bulblets can be eaten raw, can be eaten like an on-the-go snack. The leaves and shoots, spring harvest is best. They tend to become tough with age. They have a pleasant tartness associated with them. Using the shoots in a similar way to rhubarb or as a cooked herb, the roots are best harvested in the spring before flowering begins. It helps. They maintain their energy that is dissipated as they flower. They're starchy. They can be eaten raw or boiled. Use them in soups and stews. You can roast them or use them and dry them and grind them into a flour that can be used. So you can use flour from the seeds as well as flour from the roots. The size of the seeds you can see is very small, about 2.5 millimeters in length. A recipe for pearled barley pilaf with steered Bistort leaves. 2 cups of young Bistort leaves, so those would be the leaves down near the basal stem of the plant. You can see the diagram here. 1 cup of pearled barley, 1 onion finely diced, and a clove of garlic crushed or diced. And 3 cups of water or vegetable broth stock. Cook the pearled barley and half of the onion and half of the garlic for 45 minutes. And then sear or saute the Bistort leaves with the other half of onion and the garlic, and then serve that over the leaves. And serve the barley over the leaves. So from a medicinal standpoint, the roots are astringent in nature. It helps to draw tissue together and may assist with skin issues and perhaps even dental and oral issues of periodontal disease and the like. It's used as a wound dressing for lung and stomach hemorrhaging, that is bleeding out from various causes, jaundice, fever treatment, as an internal and external bleeding stopper, nosebleeds and polyps, dysentery and diarrhea. It's a antiparasitic, so a vermifuge for intestinal worms. Can help to mitigate PMS pain and other inflamed mucous membranes. Can also make a tea of the American Bistort as well and use it as a mouthwash or gargle for various oral inflammation. You can make a decoction of both the leaf or the root. So remember, this is a water extraction of the medicinal properties of a plant. So 1 teaspoon of the leaves or root to 1 cup of water, boil it, simmer it for 10 to 15 minutes, and then drink or gargle it up to 3 times per day. So you can consume it internally and externally. Our next plant that we'll look at today is the beargrass, Xerophyllum tenax, also known as basket grass. It's one of the first plants that comes into burned over areas along with fireweed that grows and pioneers in burned over areas. It blooms every 3 to 10 years. So once it starts, it takes several years to come to maturity and blooming. So in that regard, it is somewhat tenuous in a landscape in that it can be over-harvested if it doesn't have the opportunity to flower and reseed itself. So every 3 to 10 years, it blooms en masse, and they bloom simultaneously. We'll see a picture later on that shows them in large fields or meadows of beargrass that is blooming. It's often used in basketry and weaving for the grasses. Native Americans would travel to specific regions to specifically find beargrass for their basketry needs. You can see that down at the bottom that there's one that combines yucca leaves and beargrass in a basket form. So it's a subalpine resident from western BC to California and eastward to Wyoming. So the flower stalk you can see is tall and club-like, up to 5 feet tall, tightly packed, white, dense blossoms. The leaf is wiry and tough, curved and grassy-looking leaves. So it may present itself for several years before it actually blooms and is recognizable as beargrass. From an edibility standpoint, the roots and the seed pods are edible. You can harvest the roots and roast them and the seed pods. It can be a rare plant, so kind of keep it as a last resort sort of food stuff. The roots can be strong and stringy, so slice them thinly. The seed pods, you want to gather them after they're nice and dry. Do that in the fall prior to the fall rains or snow. The roots you want to dig after the plant completes making its seed and they come to maturity. You can see a cross-section of the beargrass that hasn't flowered here on the lower right with the root stalk there. Remember that it can be a rare plant, so leave twice as many as the amount that you actually harvest, plants that you harvest, to ensure future harvests. From a medicinal standpoint, the roots can function as a poultice and may aid and accelerate wound healing. A recipe using beargrass. You can roast the beargrass root. Here's just a beautiful field of beargrass, outstanding, so that you would not see again for another 3 to 10 years because they only have that kind of sporadic flowering cycle. But when they do bloom, they would bloom together in mass. So 1/2 pound of sliced grass roots, a 1/2 pound of sliced carrots, a 1/2 pound of chunked tomato and turnips, 1 onion, and 2 cloves of sliced garlic, and then salt, thyme, and rosemary as desired. So toss your veggies into a roasting pan with water, salt, and herbs, and then toss that into a pan with water, remove from the oven, and add the vegetables to it. Bake at 350 degrees for 30 minutes, and then remove and toss, and you can recoat it again as desired. So you might want to moisten it a little bit so that you can recoat it with the herbs, and then cook it an additional 30 minutes and serve that hot. You can see the range map down below. So it's a western kind of flower, more elevated typically, prefers burned over areas. So look for the areas where forest fires have happened or controlled burns. We're seeing more of those lately, so it may become more available. So Washington, Oregon, California, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming are its range of growth. Again, thank you very much, and if you'd like to review this and other topics in the same series, you can go to www.preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com. Goodbye and God bless.